Let's dive into this history. Skin and wind. The forest swallowed light long before the sun touched the horizon. Here, at the northernmost edge of the empire, where the trees grew like bones of forgotten gods and the cold came early, autumn was not a season, it was a verdict. The air hung damp and heavy, tinged with rot and iron. Wind stirred the leaves like whispered warnings. Shadows moved without cause. And through this narrow, half-forgotten road moved the chain. 32 prisoners. Bound in pairs. One chain, many names. None spoken. The caravan crawled like a wound through the wilderness, guided by 8 Roman guards, not legionnaires, but hard-eyed contractors, rough with power and bored with it. Their cloaks dragged the mud. Their swords never left their sides. They spoke in low tones, laughing now and then at things not worth laughter. Among the captives Talon, a broad man, dark of skin, face as still as carved stone. His arms, scarred like old bark, bore signs of survival, not surrender. A shard of a bronze pendant hung around his neck, worn and broken, as though snapped from something long lost. The rawhide around his wrist strained with every step. The irons never quite fit him. Beside him, Rinn. Younger. Lighter. Eyes too quick. Muscles tight with tension but lean. His gaze moved constantly, up the trail, into the trees, toward the guards, toward the sky. He had the look of someone who counted things no one else noticed. The kind who lived not by strength, but by reading when others blinked. They had been chained together by mistake. It would be the Empire's last one on this road. That evening, the caravan stopped. It was a clearing carved between massive tree trunks, their roots like sprawled limbs. The guards unpacked salted meat and wine, muttering about the cold, the pay, the route. They tethered the prisoners to the trees, some upright, some slumped, and returned to their fires. Laughter echoed. Meat hissed. One guard sang something half-drunken in Latin. Talon didn't move. Rinn sat with his back against the bark, arms stiff with the pull of the lashings. Wrong tree for a grave, he muttered. Talon gave no answer. And then, the horse screamed. One of the pack beasts, spooked by a snapping branch, jerked back against its lead. A cart shifted. A guard stumbled. Someone shouted. A dog barked. Wine spilled on the fire. Sparks leapt. And Talon moved. No command. No warning. He twisted, not like a man breaking free, but like a bear shrugging off winter. The rawhide snapped, pulled too tight around flesh too strong. Rinn flinched as the binding between them tore free. He didn't ask. He didn't wait. They ran. The chaos behind them bloomed, voices yelling, dogs let loose, steel unsheathed. But the forest answered louder. Every root, every branch, every slick stone underfoot grabbed at them, trying to drag them back. The cold clung to their throats, biting with each breath. Their bodies, weak from days of starvation and restraint, moved by instinct alone. Rinn tripped, stumbled. His boot caught on torn leather. Blood ran from his shin. Talon grabbed him, dragged him forward. They didn't speak. Words were for those who had time to hear them. And time was chasing them on 4 legs with fangs. They didn't know how far they ran. Only that, eventually, their legs gave out. And there, under the arched roots of a massive beech, they collapsed. It smelled of damp moss and earth, of mushrooms and old rot. But it was hidden. And that was enough. Rinn coughed, his breath thin, his arms trembling. You could have gone without me. Talon leaned against the trunk, blood trickling from a tear in his shoulder. You didn't have to run. But I did. A pause. Because you did. Talon closed his eyes. Rinn lay back against the roots. The canopy above held no stars. Just branches, like ribs overhead. And for the first time in days there were no commands. No chains. No numbers barked. Just the sound of wind between trees. Their breathing. And the knowledge that they had crossed the line. Not into safety, but into choice. They were not free. Not yet. But the chain was broken. And sometimes the first crack is the loudest sound a soul ever hears. The forest had no voice in the morning. It watched. Long trunks rose into the gray sky like pillars of a forgotten cathedral. Their branches reached like old fingers, bare and black against the cloud light. Mist lay heavy on the ground, moving slow and low, wrapping the roots in silence. The sun, if it existed, was only a faded smudge between limbs. Rinn woke with a gasp. The bark beneath him was damp. His fingers curled as if trying to catch heat that wasn't there. Every joint ached. His breath fogged before his face. "They're still looking," he muttered, eyes darting. "Or they've given up." "No one gives up when someone's paying," Talon replied. He was already sitting upright, back against the root wall, one arm bound tight in a strip of cloth torn from his own ragged shirt. His breath was steady, his face blank. Rinn pulled his knees to his chest. His clothes clung to him, damp, torn, reeking of blood, smoke, and soil. He tried to joke. "Dreamed of a house again. That same one with the crooked roof and smoke coming from the chimney. You know what I want now? Not a bed. Not even fire. Just a bowl. Any bowl. With anything in it." Talon didn't respond. He twisted the cloth on his shoulder tighter. The skin underneath looked raw. Angry. His knuckles were pale with pressure. The cold wasn't just around them. It was inside them now. Beneath the ribs. Between the thoughts. By midday, they had left their hollow beneath the tree. Rinn led with cautious steps, eyes flicking between rocks and roots. Talon walked behind, slower, heavier. Their direction was meaningless. They had no map. No plan. Only the certainty that behind them, men still tracked. They moved in circles at first. The same broken stump appeared twice. Rinn swore under his breath. Talon said nothing. Then a break. A patch of green-black thorns. Among them, berries. Wild, wrinkled, but edible. Rinn fell to his knees, scooping a handful like treasure. "Gods," he whispered, mouth full. "I've missed the taste of not metal." Talon took only 3. Farther ahead, a hollow of water. Not stagnant, running from somewhere higher. Cold. Dark. But drinkable. They knelt, faces near the pool. The reflection didn't look like men. More like shadows wearing old names. After drinking, Talon walked to a dead branch and snapped off a length. He began grinding one end against a flat rock. Back and forth. Slow. Patient. Rinn tilted his head. "That for walking or for killing?" "Whichever comes first." "Who do you expect?" Talon didn't look up. "Anyone." It came to a boil not long after. Rinn stood suddenly. "We need to move." Talon didn't stop grinding. "We will." "No, I mean now. They'll find the fire. They'll find the berries. The trail. We'll move when I can." Rinn's eyes flashed. "And if your when is too late?" Talon finally looked up. "You want to run on legs that break halfway through? I want to live. And I want to stop bleeding." Their voices echoed too loudly between the trees. Then a sound. A snap. Not theirs. Both froze. Talon held the sharpened stick now. Rinn crouched beside him. Between the trunks, movement. A shape. 4 legs. Thick neck. A moose. Massive. Its antlers a crown of living bone. It watched them from 30 feet away. Then turned. Vanished into fog. But its silence was too perfect. Rinn whispered. That wasn't all moose, was it?" Talon didn't answer. Because it could have been. Or it wasn't. And the forest wouldn't tell. They stopped before night. Found a dry patch beneath a leaning stone. For the first time, they made fire. Only a small one. Carefully shielded. Rinn held his hands over the flicker, eyes glazed with the ache of warmth. Talon lay back and pulled a smooth stone from the dirt. He placed it on his chest, just below the collarbone, and breathed in slow. Rinn watched. "Why the stone?" Talon stared at the firelight through the trees. "To remember weight." "What kind of weight?" Mine! Rinn lay beside him. Might not be men anymore, he whispered. But we're not theirs either. Talon didn't speak. But he nodded. And that, for the first time, was something between them that didn't come from shared pain. It came from shared choice. The fire cracked once. The mist curled around it. The forest listened, but didn't come closer. And the two men, no longer just escaped slaves, not yet brothers, closed their eyes under the ancient trees. They were still hunted. Still cold. But not alone. The forest had changed. It no longer felt like a place to flee through. It had become a presence. Watching. Listening. Each tree leaned in just enough to remind them, you are not alone. The ground, wet with moss and riddled with root, sucked at every step like it knew their weight. Rinn moved first. His steps were light, practiced now. He placed his feet on stone, in old riverbeds, in the hollows of logs. Behind him, Talon walked with slower, measured strength, not silent, but careful. Either of them spoke. It was the second morning since the escape. The air was thicker. The light duller. Even the crows stayed quiet. They were going north, deeper into a part of the forest few dared name. Where even wolves didn't stray from the trails. Where old stories said the trees didn't forget a trespasser. But behind them, men still followed. Far back, in clearer woods, three figures moved with deadly intent. Gaius Lentulus, once a legionary, now a hunter of runaways. His eyes were black, his cloak oil-stained, his hands stained from old work. He didn't smile. He didn't rush. They're close, he said, crouching beside a disturbed patch of ferns. They're desperate. They'll leave signs. To his right, Draco, a brute of a man with a glaive strapped across his back, old gladiator marks tattooed in circles on his arms. He smelled of rust and wine, and he cracked his neck like it was a promise. And behind them, Cass. Thin as a wire. Pale as bone. Fingers twitching constantly. He crouched, brushed a broken twig, and hissed. Still warm. They passed here not 2 hours ago. Gaius rose. They'll freeze by nightfall, he said. Or starve. And when they do, they'll light fire. Or beg a village. And then, Draco rumbled, I get to make them scream. Gaius nodded once. No talking. No warning. No mercy. That same hour, Rinn crouched near a fallen branch. He didn't want to believe what he saw. A break, clean, fresh, too recent. Too straight, he murmured. Talon appeared beside him like a bear from mist. Scent too, he said, pointing down to a spot where wet pawprints crossed mud. Dogs. They locked eyes. They're following. Talon straightened. Then we go where they won't. To the north? To the deep. Rinn hesitated. If they catch us, there won't be time to think. He looked away. Let's make sure we're not the ones being hunted. They made their first trap that day. It wasn't much, a bluff, a misdirection. They tied Rinn's tattered cloak to a bent pine, left footprints in the dirt leading east, then vanished west, deeper into a place where sunlight barely touched the ground. For the first time, they weren't only running. They were racing, and becoming less. Not men. Shadows. By evening, they reached a narrow, cold stream. The water whispered, the only sound bold enough to speak in that part of the woods. They washed their hands. Drank. Hid beneath a rock overhang tangled in moss. No fire. Only breath. And stone. Far in the distance, the faint scent of smoke. Maybe a village. Maybe not. Maybe a camp of men with leashes and knives. Rinn huddled near the edge of the rock. Talon, he asked quietly, were you ever free? Talon didn't answer at first. His eyes were closed. His chest rose slowly. I remember, he said finally. A stone. Rinn waited. I was young. I picked it up. Smooth white. I held it too long. He opened his eyes. The man beat me with it. No more words came. But something shifted in the silence. Not trust, not yet. But something close. Rinn whispered. We may not be men anymore. But we're not theirs either. And this time, Talon nodded. That night, the forest stayed quiet. Too quiet. The air didn't move. The river slowed. Even dreams came softly, not of chains, but of long roads, of wind, of a distant howl. Somewhere behind them, fire flickered. But before them, only the dark. And the silence that comes just before teeth show. By the third day, the forest felt more alive than either of them. It breathed beneath their feet, whispered in the high branches, exhaled frost down the ravines. The sun barely touched the canopy. Instead, a cold, silver-gray haze lingered between trunks, never thick enough to blind, but enough to steal the edges of every shape. Talon walked ahead, spear in hand. His movements had become slower, not from fatigue, but control. Rinn followed, holding a sharpened stone, eyes scanning with the hunger of a creature that knew danger didn't always roar. Their silence was not trust. It was instinct. Even the birds were quiet today. Then the wind changed. A shift in scent, rot, blood, old iron. They stopped together, unspoken. Rinn sniffed the air. Something's dead. Talon didn't respond. He crouched, touching the ground. The mud had been disturbed, recently. They moved toward it, every step deliberate. Soon they saw the glint of metal among the leaves. Not weapons. Armor. A man, collapsed in a crude pit, no more than a dozen feet deep, camouflaged with old branches and wet leaves. At the bottom, sharpened wooden stakes rose from the earth like broken teeth. One had pierced the man's thigh clean through. He was alive, barely. And familiar. Rinn swore under his breath. That's the tracker. Cass. Thin, spider-like, with eyes that had seen too much. He now lay pale, lips trembling, the strength gone from his limbs. Talon said nothing. He stood over the edge, watching. In Cass's pack, dried meat. A flask. A folded map stained with sweat and mud. A leather amulet, carved with tribal markings, crude but meaningful. Rinn rummaged quickly, tossing items into his own satchel. He's done! The forest finished it. He's breathing, Talon said softly. Rinn frowned. And what? You want to pull him out? Feed him? Bandage that hole in his leg and give him a ride home? No reply. Just stillness. Cass opened his eyes and tried to speak, a rasp, wet and broken. Talon looked at him. Then tore a strip of cloth from his own cloak and tossed it into the pit. Not for healing. For silence. They began layering branches and leaves atop the fallen body. Not to bury him. Just to muffle the sound of dying. Cass whimpered once, then bit down on the cloth to stifle the rest. Not our hands, Talon murmured. But still our consequence. Rinn didn't argue. They took his food, his water, his map, and left him to the forest. The map led them north, toward a crude charcoal mark labeled simply, Old Hunter's Hut. They moved quickly, staying low. The hut, when they found it, was half collapsed, walls leaning like a man too long in the wind. But the roof held. Inside, rotted hides, a broken chair, an iron hook on the wall, and old bones in the corner. But it was dry. They entered without speaking. Rinn dropped by the fire pit and began laying out their meager supplies. Talon walked the room slowly, testing each beam with his weight. Then he sat by the entrance, facing out. They ate the meat. It was tough and old, but it was food. They washed it down with silence. Rinn peeled off his boots. His feet were raw, blistered. He didn't wince. Instead, he laughed. We're alive, he said, voice hoarse. Still running. Still breathing. He lay on a lopsided bench and stared at the roof. Do you think he deserved it? He asked. Talon didn't answer. Wasn't screaming when he tracked us. Wasn't crying when he sold others. But still, that scream at the end. Silence again. Then Talon said, he was once like us. But he became something else. Or maybe he just forgot. Rinn drifted into a half-sleep. Talon remained at the doorway, knife in hand, watching the trees. Outside, the river murmured. The leaves moved with ancient rhythm. A branch cracked far off. Animal or man, neither stirred him. "I can't sleep," Rinn whispered, eyes still closed. Talon didn't turn. "Maybe," Rinn added, "it's because I'm no longer a slave." Talon looked up. His grip on the knife eased slightly. Then nodded. Not in agreement, but in recognition. In the middle of the night, something howled. Not a wolf. Not quite. But neither man rose. Because the forest was full of voices. And tonight, they were not the only ones listening. Rain whispered against the roof. Not heavy. Not wild. Just steady, a soft tapping rhythm, like fingers drumming against old wood. It crept down the cracked shingles, slid through the gaps in the walls, and left silver streaks across the moss-darkened logs of the old hunter's hut. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of age, damp bark, dried blood, and the ghost of smoke baked into timber long ago. But the fire they built now was theirs. Small, hidden, steady. Its flames cast trembling shadows across the dirt floor and onto the faces of two men who had spent too long in the cold to need conversation. Talon sat by the door, sharpening the point of his spear, one slow pull against stone, again and again. Rinn knelt beside the fire, turning their ragged clothes above the heat, watching water hiss and disappear into steam. He wrapped bark around his foot, tying it tight with a strip of shredded cloth. His movements were careful, almost gentle. The rituals of survival were becoming habit. Maybe even comfort. Talon divided the last strips of dried meat, setting them between them with equal weight. Not generosity. Respect. Rinn took his share, chewing slowly, staring into the flickering light. Then, quietly, he asked, "Why didn't you run on your own?" Talon didn't look up. "Because I was tied to you." Rinn nodded, eyes still on the fire. "But the strap broke." "It did." Rinn raised a brow. "So?" Talon finally looked at him. "By then, I'd already decided to take you with me." A beat. Then, Rinn laughed. Not sharp. Not bitter. Real. "You might just be a fool." "Maybe," Talon said. "Or maybe you're just light enough to carry." The fire danced higher. Rinn leaned back against a crooked beam. His eyes softened, voice shifting, thinner, almost younger. "There was a forest like this near where I lived. Not as quiet, though. More birds. We used to run through the underbrush chasing rabbits. My mother taught me how to snare them, showed me how to move without snapping a twig." He fell silent for a moment. "Then one day, they came. Not soldiers. Just men with fire. They burned everything." He looked down. "I hid under the roots of an old elm. Watched the smoke through the cracks in the bark." "She didn't hide." Talon said nothing for a long time. Then, "I remember building forts from stone. I was good with my hands. My son liked to watch. He'd wave at me through the slats, until the gate shut." He swallowed. "I was inside. He wasn't." Neither man looked at the other. But both sat closer to the fire. The night deepened. Rain thickened, becoming a rhythm louder than breath. The hut creaked softly, not in warning, but in memory. As if it too had known what it meant to survive winters it hadn't asked for. Rinn shifted, wrapping himself in an old net like a blanket. "I don't miss chains," he muttered, "but I do miss walls that didn't leak." Talon chuckled once, low, rough. It felt out of place on his lips. But it stayed. Then, a sound. Not rain. Not fire. Outside, a crunch. Slow. Measured. Like breath in leaves. Both men tensed. Talon rose without a word, spear in hand. Rinn, eyes wide now, reached for his sharpened stone. They moved without sound to the wall. Waited. A footstep. Then another. Too soft for armor. Too slow for animal. The breath of the forest held still. Then silence. And then, the steps moved away. Not toward them. Just passing by. A shape unseen. A presence unfelt until it had already gone. They didn't relax. Not fully. But they breathed. Later, as Rinn lay back down, eyes half-lidded, he whispered, "If I live to spring, I'll carve your face into a tree." Talon raised an eyebrow. "So the crows have something to aim at?" Rinn smiled. "Exactly." Silence again. But not the kind filled with fear. The kind that held space. For grief. For breath. For things not yet said. Talon leaned back against the doorframe. His eyes didn't close. But for once, he didn't feel alone on the other side of them. Outside, the storm rolled on. But inside, for one night, they were warm. Not from fire. But from something older than that. The fire had died in its sleep. Only soft coils of smoke curled from the ash, like the breath of something that had once been alive. Cold clung to the gaps in the old hut's walls. Frost laced the edges of the windows, turning the dawn into a pale blur beyond the warped glass. Rinn stirred under a bundle of netting and furs. For the first time in days, his hands weren't numb. His breath wasn't ragged. His heart wasn't sprinting the moment he woke. It felt wrong. "I don't remember," he whispered. "The last time I woke up without fear." Across the room, Talon was already up. Seated against the doorframe, his spear resting across his knees. His eyes didn't move from the thin gap in the wall. But there was a weight behind them. Alert. Sharp. Watching. Rinn sat up slowly. "You see something?" Talon didn't answer. But the line of his shoulders was tight. Outside, the frost hadn't lifted. The grass cracked underfoot. Mist hovered like breath that hadn't yet decided which direction to go. They circled the perimeter in silence. It was Rinn who almost stepped on the mark, a bent stalk, flattened at a strange angle. Not by wind. Not by beast. Talon crouched. Ran a finger over a shallow heel print in the moss. Too large. Too fresh. Not theirs. "Hunter?" Rinn asked, voice barely above the wind. Talon stood. "Hunters don't stop to stare at dying fires." Miles away, a man like a stone in motion moved through the trees. Draco. The scarred warrior. The former slave who now wore Roman coin and silence like a second skin. He had come close in the night. Close enough to see the firelight. Close enough to hear the breathing through the cracks. But he hadn't entered. He hadn't needed to. "Two of them," he'd said to himself. "One heavy. One quick." He'd watched the flicker. Judged the weight of their hope by the steadiness of their fire. Now he moved back to Gaius Lentulus, stepping between roots like they remembered him. "They were there," he said simply. "Now they're not." Gaius smirked. "Then we run them down before they believe they've won." Rinn and Talon stared at the map again. One path remained unsearched, a loop through old marshland. No trails. No markers. Just low water, deep roots, and a place no sane man crossed unless he had nothing left to lose. "Slow," Rinn muttered. "But quiet," Talon replied. "And if we vanish in that muck?" "Then we vanish." Rinn folded the map, tucked it into the cloth around his chest. "Let's get lost, then." The bog did not welcome them. It sucked at their boots like it wanted them back. Every step pulled harder. The trees here were fewer, twisted and hunched, their bark riddled with holes like bones drilled for marrow. The mist thickened until it felt like breathing through cloth. After an hour, Talon sank up to his thigh. He cursed once, quiet but sharp. Rinn grabbed him with both arms, bracing against a gnarled root. Mud pulled back like hands. "Don't you dare die in a swamp," Rinn hissed, hauling him free. Talon flopped onto a patch of damp stone, panting. Rinn sat beside him. "This was your plan, remember? Remind me to regret it when I'm dry." They laughed, dry, bitter, but real. Later, Rinn slipped on a moss log. His foot caught between roots. A sharp jolt, pain lancing up his leg. He couldn't walk. Talon didn't hesitate. He hauled Rinn onto his back. Walked until his legs trembled. then dropped to his knees beside a crooked rock. They both lay in the wet grass, staring at the mist-blurred sky. "If you say we should have stayed with the caravan," Rinn muttered, "I'll bite you. I'm glad I didn't leave you." Rinn smiled through the pain. "Damn fool." By nightfall, they made shelter beneath a cluster of leaning pines. No fire. No food. Just breath and silence. Rinn lay curled, holding his leg. Talon crouched by the trees, listening. "Will we get out of this forest?" Rinn asked. Talon didn't move. Then, quietly, "Maybe not. But maybe this forest gets into us. A beat. And maybe we don't leave it behind. Maybe we carry it." The silence held. And this time, it didn't feel like defeat. Far behind them, boots moved. Careful. Silent. Not close. But closer than yesterday. The trees looked like bones reaching for the sky. Each branch curled downward like a hook, bent beneath the weight of mist. The forest was soaked, not just with water, but with cold that clung to the skin like a second, unwelcome layer. The air tasted of wet iron and rot. It scraped the inside of their noses with every breath. The fifth day began without light. Only dimness. Only breath. Rinn tried to rise. He didn't make it far. A hand gripped his chest. His breath hitched. The world tilted. He croaked. "I can't." Talon knelt beside him, already pressing fingers to Rinn's forehead. Burning. He didn't need words. The eyes told enough, glazed, wild, unfocused. His shirt clung to him with sweat despite the cold. His body trembled without rhythm, like a branch in a storm. "You've got fever," Talon muttered. Rinn tried to respond. His lips moved. But nothing clear came. They couldn't stay on the open trail. Talon scouted fast, scanning trees, testing earth. A hollow beneath the roots of a massive pine gave shelter, just deep enough, just hidden enough. He laid out dry moss, lined it with gathered leaves, and gently lowered Rinn into the hollow. Rinn moaned. His limbs twitched. Talon wrapped him in the last dry cloak they had. Then sat beside him. And waited. Spear on his lap. Eyes fixed outward. The hours were slow and hard. Rinn drifted in and out of fevered sleep. He tossed. Murmured. "Ma." His lips cracked. His brow furrowed. "I didn't tell them. I just wanted to run." Then, sharper. "I'm not a traitor. I just—" Silence. Talon didn't move. But his hand found Rinn's shoulder. Not to shake. Not to steady. Just to be there. The sun barely rose. Only a sickly pale light that made the trees look even older. Talon worked quietly. He gathered fresh leaves, wrung dew from them into Rinn's mouth. Fed him bits of dried berry from a pouch taken off the tracker days ago. Checked the leg, still red, still angry. But wrapped well. Time blurred. At one point he spoke. Not loudly. Not to Rinn. Maybe not even to himself. "I carried my son across a field once," he said, voice dry. "He had fever too. Wasn't this bad, but it scared me." He sat straighter. "The healers said he'd live. That he was strong. And he was." A pause. Then Rome came. His hands tightened around the spear. "They took him. Said he looked fit. Useful. They left me in chains and took him away." His eyes burned. But he didn't cry. "I screamed until my throat bled. But it didn't stop them. So I stopped screaming." He looked down at Rinn's flushed face. "I couldn't save him." His hand moved slowly to tighten the wrap on Rinn's calf. "But maybe I can save you." Night came early. Wind hissed between trees. Branches moaned in places where bark had split from cold. Talon crouched near the entrance of their root shelter, listening. A sound. Crunching. Slow. His hand tightened on the spear. A shadow moved between the trees, low, grunting. He rose to one knee, ready. Then tusks. A shaggy snout. A wild boar nosed through fallen leaves, snorting. It paused, looked toward him. For a moment their eyes met. Then the beast turned, trotted off into the dark. Talon exhaled. Not tonight. Not yet. At dawn, the mist lifted just enough to let breath warm the air. Rinn stirred. His eyes opened, sluggish, confused. He blinked, saw Talon's silhouette beside him. I thought, he coughed. I thought I was back, in the chain line. Talon didn't turn his head. I didn't carry you. He said it low, firm. I stayed. Rinn tried to smile. That's the same thing. Talon glanced at him now. And nodded. Once. They didn't walk that morning. But they didn't fear either. For the first time, the forest didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a witness. And both of them, fevered or not, strong or not, were still alive. Far off, boots stepped in rhythm through damp ferns. Draco paused at a ridge, scanning the ground. He saw the drag marks. One carried the other. A grin crept over his face. Not far now. The forest was changing again. Where the marshes had clung like hands, the new trail breathed wider, a forgotten path lined with ancient trees and the whisper of a breeze that still remembered older tongues. The air tasted of moss and iron. The moss underfoot was thick, soft, and riddled with memory. No one had hunted here for seasons. Perhaps years. It was a place that had once belonged to men. Now it belonged only to silence. Talon walked first, as always. His gait steady, though slower now. Not from weariness, from watchfulness. Rinn limped behind, but he walked on his own. Each step was effort, but each step was his. Feels like my legs are arguing with my ribs, he muttered, exhaling through pain. Let them argue, Talon said without looking back. Just don't let them win. They shared a smile, faint but real. Then Talon stopped. His eyes were on the mud ahead. Footprints. Wide. Bare. Not fresh, but not yet spoiled by wind or rain. Rinn leaned closer. Someone walked through here. Not Roman, Talon said. No armor. No boots. And limping, he added. Right foot drags. They exchanged a glance. Then pressed on, slower, quieter. It didn't take long. At the bend of the trail, half hidden beneath an arching pine, they found him. A man. Alone. Sitting with his back to a tree, legs stretched before him like he'd simply stopped and decided he would not start again. His clothes were torn in ways only time and struggle could explain. His beard tangled. His face sun-darkened and shadowed. His arms hung at his sides, one trembling faintly. A branded slave mark glared from his shoulder, slashed across with a blade, long healed into a jagged scar. And on his neck, strung with rough twine, a leather amulet shaped like a wolf's fang. He looked at them. Not startled. Not pleading. Not afraid. Just watching. Like something half-wild. Rinn took a step. Talon stopped him. What's your name? He asked the man. No answer. Where are you coming from? Still silence. Then a rasp voice cracked from disuse. South. From the mountains. From stone fields and burning iron. They killed my kin. Took my feet. Took my name. He touched the thong at his throat. I don't want revenge. I want a place where I'm not hunted. Where I'm not a ghost. His breath caught. Do you know of such a place? Rinn pulled out the flask and knelt. The man's eyes widened slightly, not in hope, but in confusion. As if this part of the world had forgotten kindness. Talon didn't stop him. It was a decision. The same kind he'd once made for Rinn. His name was Brenn. He had escaped 3 weeks ago. Alone. He ate roots. Drank puddle water. Avoided all fire. Spoke to birds to remember words. 2 years in chains, he said that night. No names. No sleep without blood. I forgot my voice. Remembered only the trees. He asked for nothing. But when they rose, he rose too. No permission asked. No oath spoken. They didn't object. 3 now. That night, they found a hollow beneath a rock ridge, where the wind couldn't reach. They didn't light fire, the sky was too clear, the threat too close. But they ate, carefully dividing what little remained. Brenn waited until both had taken theirs. He took the smallest piece. Didn't speak. Didn't sleep first. But when he lay down, it was the sleep of someone not expecting to wake with a knife at his throat. Rinn watched him from across the camp. Then turned to Talon. He walks like a wolf. Talon nodded slowly. Wolves don't always bite, he said. Sometimes they just want to stop walking alone. And so they slept, not deeply, not safely. But not alone. Far behind them, a man in a black cloak crouched beside old tracks. Gaius Lentulus traced the limp in the mud with a gloved hand. 3 now, he said softly. Draco smiled behind him. 3 bodies. The forest thinned. Where once trunks had pressed like prison bars, now open fields beckoned. Wide sweeps of dead grass rolled toward distant hills. The sky, for the first time in days, was visible, heavy and gray, but vast. Freedom smelled closer. But it also smelled of smoke. A thin thread of it curled into the sky ahead, rising from a low house tucked near the edge of a barren field. They moved toward it, slowly. Rinn staggered with every step, barely upright. Talon and Brenn held him by each arm, bearing most of his weight without complaint. Their bodies were wreckage, hollowed out by hunger, soaked in cold, torn by thorns and time. They needed food, water, shelter, anything. And so they approached the house. A man waited outside. Round, red-cheeked, dressed in rough-spun clothes patched a dozen times. He smiled broadly, his teeth crooked but clean. In his hands a basket. The smell hit them first, fresh bread. He waved them closer. Travelers! You look near dead. Come in. Warm yourselves. I have soup. A bit of bread. Even a corner of the stable you can sleep in. Rinn nearly collapsed from the smell alone. Brenn lingered back, his body taut as a drawn bowstring. Talon squeezed the shaft of his spear. But then, he nodded. They needed this. Inside, the world became softer. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the room with a warmth that tasted almost sinful. The floor was clean. A battered table stood heavy with bread, cheese, and a steaming pot that smelled of salted meat. They ate. First cautiously, then faster. The man laughed, poured them water, clapped Rinn on the shoulder. No need to fear. I was a traveler once. Know what it's like to have the cold in your bones. Rinn, between gasps of soup, whispered, Maybe the world's not all rotten. Talon allowed himself a breath. Maybe. But the world didn't change its nature. It just hid it well. While they ate, the man excused himself to fetch more ale, and disappeared into a back corner. Talon heard it first. The scrape of metal. He turned. Too late. From a hatch in the floor, 2 men emerged, knives gleaming. Their faces were blank with the easy cruelty of men who had done this before. And from the back, the fat man, smiling still, holding a pair of heavy chains. Forgive me, he said, but every slave's worth a bounty. And your brands, well, they're still visible enough. His eyes gleamed. Rome pays well for runaways. Talon didn't hesitate. He rose, grabbed a loose beam from the wall, and swung. The first man crumpled with a gurgled grunt. Brenn was moving too, shoving Rinn toward the door, blocking a blade with his forearm, knocking a stool into another attacker's legs. Rinn stumbled but made it outside. Talon fought like a man whose body had already accepted the price. A knife cut his shoulder, blood streamed down his side. But he stayed standing. He swung again, smashing another man back into the wall. Brenn kicked open the door fully, throwing Rinn into the field beyond. Run! He roared. Talon followed, backing out with spear raised. They ran. Behind them, the fat man screamed. Bring them back. Bring me my silver. The open field welcomed them with no cover, no protection, only cold air and the endless tug of exhaustion. Their legs screamed. Their lungs tore. But they ran. Because there was no other choice. They didn't stop until the house was a memory. At the base of an old hill, they collapsed. Rinn rolled onto his back, gasping. Talon tore a strip of cloth and pressed it to his bleeding shoulder. Brenn limped around the perimeter, setting makeshift traps with broken twine and sharp sticks. Silent. Efficient. Rinn laughed weakly through cracked lips. No more bread without thorns. Talon wiped the blood from his arm. And smiled, raw, broken, real. Now you understand the world. The night pressed in. Hard. But they didn't light a fire. Not this time. The cold was safer than a stranger's welcome. And survival, earned by blood, tasted sharper than any meal. Far across the fields, torchlights began to flicker. Small. Distant. But moving. The bounty hunters would come. But so would morning. And sometimes that was enough. The river waited for them. Wide and gray beneath a shroud of low clouds, it carved a line between the choking woods behind them and the misted hills beyond. Here, trees thinned into crooked silhouettes. Beyond, open land. Open skies. Freedom. Or the closest thing to it they'd ever tasted. But first, the river. It wasn't water anymore. It was a frozen beast, stretched belly up across the valley floor. The ice was dusted in snow, cracked in long, jagged scars that ran like ancient veins. In some places, dark puddles of melt bled through the surface, warning of where death waited just one wrong step away. Talon stood at the bank, spear in hand. Behind him, Rinn leaned against Brenn, both wrapped in every rag they still carried, bodies trembling more from exhaustion than cold. Rinn's voice cracked the silence. Can we cross it? Talon didn't answer immediately. He squinted at the stretch of thin silver under a sky that felt too heavy to bear. Brenn said it for him. If we don't, we stay here. Until the bounty hunters find us. Or the winter does. Rinn nodded once. No argument left. Only choice. The plan was simple. Talon would go first, testing every step with the shaft of his spear. Brenn and Rinn would follow, one pace at a time, spacing out to avoid overloading any one spot. And if the ice broke? There was no plan for that. They stepped onto the river. The first crack beneath Talon's boots sounded louder than any scream. Each step after that became a war of silence. The ice groaned, flexed. Breath clouded the air in sharp, stabbing puffs. Talon's mind narrowed to three things. Step. Test. Shift weight. Behind him, he could hear the muted scuff of Rinn's damaged foot dragging. The rasp of Brenn's steady breathing. The river stretched endless before them, a frozen sea. Halfway across, Talon paused. A spider web of cracks spread to his left, too thin. He adjusted course, angling right. The others followed without question. The air smelled of nothing. No smoke. No iron. Only the clean bite of winter itself. Then, the break. It was subtle at first. A groan beneath Brenn. A sagging in the ice. A sharp, snapping cough of sound. Talon spun, too late. The ice gave way under Brenn's foot. Brenn dropped instantly to one knee, half plunging into the river. Water surged up, black and starving. Without thinking, Talon rushed back. The spear fell. He slammed both hands onto the slick edge and reached. Hold! He barked. Brenn's hand shot out, catching Talon's wrist. The ice cracked wider. Talon gritted his teeth, pulled with everything left inside him. The surface slashed his palms. Blood spattered onto white snow. But Brenn came free. Together they scrambled backward, away from the wound in the ice. Panting. Soaked to the waist. Shivering. Alive. No one spoke. Words would have broken something fragile. Talon rose first, dragging Brenn with him. Rinn stumbled forward, grabbing at Brenn's arm. Together, the three of them half crawled, half ran across the last stretch. The ice hissed beneath them. The cracks chased their heels. At the far bank, Talon didn't slow. He lunged up the embankment, hands scrabbling into dead grass and dirt. He heaved Rinn up. Brenn followed, slipping but making it. They collapsed onto the shore. Chest heaving. Eyes closed. The river behind them groaned once more, a long, hollow sigh. But it didn't call them back. For a long time, they just lay there, letting the dirt cling to them, letting the sky press down, letting the weight of everything not happening settle into their bones. When they finally rose, they knew it. It smelled different here. No iron. No ash. Only wood smoke, thin, distant, clean. Talon stood first, pulling Rinn to his feet. Brenn staggered up beside them, wringing water from his tunic. He grinned, a sharp, wild thing. "We're close," he said. Talon nodded. "Closer than we've ever been." They didn't say it aloud, but it was in the way they looked at the hills beyond. Not like prey, not like slaves, but like men who had crossed death's threshold and left the chains behind. Behind them, the eyes shivered again. A warning to those who might follow. And maybe a promise, too. The smoke was the first sign that they had found more than wild land. Thin strands of it rose between crooked trees, curling toward the sky like forgotten songs. It didn't smell like war. It didn't smell like Rome. It smelled like pinewood and hunger. Controlled fire. Settled life. They kept moving, slower now, every step pulled from a half-dead body. Rinn leaned on Brenn's shoulder. Talon limped more than walked. But none of them stopped. They couldn't. And then they saw it. Low wooden walls, patched with dark timber. No banners. No gate towers. Just pointed stakes, a narrow slit of entrance, and 2 sentries watching from above. The village looked like it had survived a siege not by fighting, but by refusing to fall. There was no beauty. Only presence. Like a scar that refused to fade. 4 guards stepped out as they approached. Cloaks of old fur. Tunics reinforced with hide. Each held a weapon, not ceremonial, not polished, just worn from use. At the front stood a man with half his jaw pulled tight by scar tissue, as if someone had tried to cut him open and failed. His name came later, Milos. Now he simply said, "Names." Silence. Then Talon spoke. "There are none left." He didn't whisper. "We are only what survived." Milos didn't flinch. He stepped forward, studying them. Eyes on Rinn, pale and barely upright. On Brenn, tense, coiled like a wolf. Then on Talon, who met his gaze and didn't look away. "We don't live by law," Milos said. "Only by memory." He turned. "Come. Show yours." At the village center stood a stone. It wasn't tall. Not sacred. Just a slab of black rock with cracks running deep across its surface, some from time, most from knives. Burn marks lined its face. Symbols. Slashes. Half-healed carvings. A place of reckoning. "This is where we remember," Milos said. "No past. No promises. Only truth." Talon stepped forward. He pulled his torn shirt aside, exposing the brand on his collarbone, a crescent inside a square, the mark of Rome's quarry camps. He didn't speak. He just placed his hand flat on the stone. The moment stretched. Then Milos nodded. "Burned and not broken." Next came Brenn. He didn't uncover anything. Just pulled a leather strip from his wrist, revealing a bone-deep scar where chains had once rubbed raw. He laid his hand down. Milos looked longer. Then said, "You've walked far enough. Stay." Last came Rinn. He hesitated. His fingers hovered above the rock. Shaking. The silence grew heavy. But then, he pressed down. Not hard. But enough. Enough to leave the print. Enough to stay. Milos nodded. Then turned to all of them. "You can sleep behind the wall. Eat from our fire. But remember, freedom is never given. It's held. And anyone can lose their grip." Their hut was little more than 4 walls and a roof. But it was dry. There were no chains in it. And the door had a latch, not from outside, but inside. They sat on the floor, wrapped in old wool blankets someone had thrown over a chair. A bowl of water sat near the door. A crust of bread, hard but real. Rinn fell asleep curled against the wall, hands still twitching as if dreaming of flight. Brenn didn't sleep. He sat near the entrance, knife across his lap. Listening. Always. Talon stared at his hands. They were no longer shaking. They didn't hold weapons now. Or burdens. Or loss. Just air. Outside, the wind shifted. Someone laughed far off, not loud, not careless. Just alive. It startled him. He hadn't heard laughter since the chain line. He hadn't realized how much he missed it. Later that night, Milos passed by their door. He didn't speak. But he paused, looked in, and nodded once. As if to say, "You're here. We saw you. You matter." And then he vanished into the dark again. At the heart of the camp, the stone waited in the moonlight. Scarred. Solid. And now, bearing 3 more memories. The morning cracked open with a sharpness that even the fire could not blunt. Thin ice gleamed on the corners of roofs. Frost burned the ground white. Above the village of the free, no banners, no signs, only the slow, steady smoke of cooking fires blending into the winter sky. And then, a different smoke. Not theirs. Not welcome. Milos was already on the tower when Talon, Rinn, and Brenn joined him. Below them, the village stirred, women pulling cloaks tighter, children ushered indoors, men picking up axes and spears worn by years of survival. Milos spoke without looking at them. 3 riders. South markings. Roman steel. And others, mercenaries. He spat over the wall. They want their property. His gaze cut to the newcomers. But we're no market. His voice was hard as frozen earth. You chose to walk through our gate. Now you choose to stand? No orders. No threats. Only choice. Talon gripped his old spear. The wood was cracked. The iron tip notched. But it was still a spear. And so was he. He nodded once. Brenn took a hand axe from a barrel by the gate. Weighted in his palm. Silent as ever, but his eyes spoke. Rinn pulled a strip of cloth around his wounded arm, tying it with his teeth. He straightened, shaky, but determined. I spent my life running, he said, voice low. Enough. They stood. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. The first 2 attackers rode straight through the gate. Confident. Lazy. One stayed back in the tree-line, crossbow ready, expecting chaos to fall into his sights. But chaos didn't greet them. Steel did. Talon moved first. He baited the first rider into a narrow alley between 2 huts, where the ground had been soaked and frozen into a deadly sheet. The horse stumbled, the rider cursed, and Talon struck low, smashing the man's leg from the stirrup. The rider fell. Talon's spear followed, driving hard into the man's throat. Clean. Final. Brenn met the second rider head-on. He ducked under the horse's first pass, then threw his axe in a brutal, spinning arc. It sank deep into the rider's ribs, knocking him sideways off the saddle. Brenn didn't wait for death to come. He picked up a fallen sword and finished it. No words. No glory. Only survival. Rinn moved last. Crawling low between huts, he circled around toward the woods. The crossbowman never heard him. One flash of steel, one quick, desperate thrust upward, and the archer staggered back, clutching at the blade buried in his neck. He fell soundlessly into the snow. Rinn stood over him for a moment. Breathing. Living. Choosing. When it was done, the village burned the bodies. They didn't celebrate. They didn't boast. They buried the weapons deep in the earth, as if refusing to let even the memory of chains take root here. On the highest post of the gate, Milos and 2 others hung a new sign. A bundle of snapped chains, twisted together with blackened wire. No banners. No words. Only truth. This place was theirs now. Because they held it. That night, they gathered by the fire. No ceremonies. Just flame, breath, and the faint crackle of pine. Talon sat with his back to a post, the old spear across his knees. Rinn sat cross-legged, picking at the hem of his cloak. Brenn leaned against the stone, head tilted back, eyes half closed but watchful. They didn't need to speak. But they did. A little. Talon, his voice rough with smoke and exhaustion, said, "I think I know now what it means." Rinn looked up. "What?" Talon smiled, small, but real. "The skin that doesn't fear the wind." He tapped his chest. "It's not what covers you. It's what stands behind you." "Who stands behind you?" Brenn opened one eye. "HNH." Rinn laughed. It was a boy's laugh. But not a slave's. "Suppose we should carve your ugly face into a tree now?" he teased. Talon shrugged. "Carve us all." Brenn smiled, rare and slow. "Because we're not alone anymore." The fire burned lower. The wind picked up, brushing across their faces like a hand testing the living. And this time, none of them flinched. In the center of the village, the memory stone caught the moonlight. On it, scars. New ones joining the old. And far above, twisted on a pole, broken chains rattled faintly against the coming night. No empire would claim this place. No fear would root here. Only men. Only choice. Only the kind of freedom that bleeds, heals, and stands when the wind comes howling again.